Marcus had always prided himself on being a man who did the right thing, no matter the circumstance. He wasn't the type to seek attention or accolades. He just believed in being a decent human being. For years he'd worked at the large retail store in his small town, managing his responsibilities quietly. Everyone knew him as reliable, the kind of person who showed up on time, never complained, and did his job with pride. His family depended on him, his wife, 2 young kids, so Marcus took his role seriously, working long hours to make sure they were cared for. That particular day at work felt like any other. Marcus clocked in at his usual time, greeted a few coworkers with his typical quiet nod, and got to work. The store was bustling, as it often was, with customers moving in and out, filling carts with groceries and household items. The rhythm of the day was predictable: help customers, keep the shelves stocked, answer questions, and deal with the occasional complaint. By the time lunch rolled around, Marcus was looking forward to a break. He grabbed his lunch from the back room and headed to the employee area to eat. It was a busy day, and he was already feeling the weight of it. But as he passed through one of the aisles, something caught his eye. A man, elderly and using a cane, was struggling to reach a package of paper towels on the top shelf. The man stretched as far as he could, wobbling slightly, but it was clear he wasn't going to make it. Marcus glanced around, saw no one nearby, and didn't hesitate. Setting his lunch down, he walked over. "Here, let me get that for you," Marcus said, his voice calm and reassuring. The old man looked up, a bit surprised but grateful. Marcus effortlessly grabbed the paper towels from the shelf and handed them over. The man smiled and thanked him repeatedly, expressing how difficult it was to shop alone with his limited mobility. "No problem at all," Marcus replied, offering a small smile before turning to grab his lunch. Unbeknownst to him, a customer nearby had witnessed the whole thing. They stood back and pulled out their phone, recording Marcus's simple act of kindness. Marcus, unaware of the recording, thought nothing more of the interaction. To him, it was just another moment of helping someone in need. He continued with his lunch break, feeling good about his day so far. Hours later, toward the end of his shift, Marcus was called into his supervisor's office. He didn't think much of it at first. It wasn't unusual for the manager to check in on employees. But as soon as he stepped into the office, he felt the atmosphere shift. His supervisor, a tall, stern man with an unreadable expression, sat behind the desk, arms crossed. He motioned for Marcus to sit down. Marcus's stomach tightened, but he sat, trying to remain calm. "We need to talk about what happened earlier," the supervisor began, his tone flat. Marcus frowned, unsure what he was referring to. "Earlier?" "Yes, during your lunch break," the supervisor continued. "I've been made aware that you left your designated area to assist a customer in the store." Marcus blinked, confused. "The older man, with the paper towels? I was just helping him reach something." His supervisor's gaze remained cold. "I understand that. But that's not your job. You were on break, and you weren't supposed to be in that aisle. More importantly, you violated company safety protocols." Marcus's mind raced. He had helped countless customers before, with no issue. He tried to stay composed, but he felt the frustration creeping in. "I didn't think it would be a problem. The man couldn't reach and You put yourself and the customer at risk." The supervisor cut him off sharply. "What if something had happened? What if you had injured yourself? We have strict policies about this, Marcus. You're not supposed to engage with customers when you're off the clock, and certainly not in a way that could lead to an injury." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had helped someone, a simple act of kindness, nothing more. He opened his mouth to protest, to explain that it was the right thing to do, but the supervisor held up a hand, silencing him. "I'm not here to debate this with you," he said, his voice cold and final. "We take these matters seriously. Your job is under review. You'll hear from us soon about the next steps." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. His job, his livelihood, was on the line because he had helped an elderly man. The absurdity of the situation left him speechless. He nodded slowly, standing up to leave the office. As he walked out, his mind swirled with confusion and disbelief. He had always done his job well, followed the rules, and treated customers with respect. But this? Being punished for doing the right thing? It didn't make sense. What Marcus didn't know, as he left the office in a daze, was that the video of him helping the elderly man had already started spreading online. The very act that had landed him in trouble was about to take on a life of its own. But for now, all Marcus could think about was the uncertainty of what came next. The morning after the conversation with his supervisor, Marcus wakes up to find an envelope slipped under his door. He opens it, his hands slightly trembling, knowing it won't bring good news. The letter is formal, cold, and to the point. He has been fired. The stated reason: breaching safety protocols by assisting a customer during his break. No acknowledgement of the circumstances, no mention of the elderly man's struggle. Just a blunt dismissal. Marcus feels a wave of disbelief. Fired for helping someone? The weight of it sinks in as he sits at the kitchen table, staring at the letter. He had thought that maybe, after a review, there'd be a warning or some reprimand, but this, losing his job over something so small, something that was simply kind, it felt deeply unfair. He folds the letter carefully, but inside, everything is unraveling. His job had provided for his family, kept food on the table and a roof over their heads. Now it was gone. Later that day, the unexpected happens. The video, the one taken by the random customer in the store, goes viral. At first, it's just a few shares, a couple of likes. People praise Marcus for stepping up when he didn't have to. They call him a good Samaritan, a model citizen. For a brief moment, Marcus feels a flicker of hope. Maybe people will understand that he did the right thing. But the narrative quickly shifts. As the video spreads, so do the opinions. Comments start pouring in, questioning whether Marcus violated company policy, whether he deserved to be fired. Some people argue that it doesn't matter how kind the act was, rules are rules. Others, more disturbingly, hint at racial undertones, suggesting that Marcus was treated more harshly because he was black. The conversation spirals. What started as a simple act of kindness becomes a debate, and Marcus is at the center of it. The backlash leaves Marcus feeling gutted. He watches the social media comments roll in, the hashtags with his name attached, and the arguments erupting online. People he doesn't know, who weren't there, are dissecting his actions, questioning his motives. His wife tries to comfort him, telling him that the opinions of strangers don't matter, but it's hard to shake off. His kids ask why he looks so sad, and he struggles to explain what's happening. The uncertainty of what comes next weighs on him. The rent, the bills, his family's needs, it's all pressing in, and now he doesn't even have a job. The worst part is the doubt creeping in. Marcus starts questioning himself. Was it really worth it? Should he have just walked past the elderly man? He knows deep down that he couldn't have done that. He couldn't have ignored someone in need. But as the days drag on and the financial pressure mounts, those doubts grow louder. The world feels like it's punishing him for trying to do the right thing. In the midst of Marcus's turmoil, voices of support begin to emerge. Local activists, outraged by the injustice of Marcus's firing, start rallying on his behalf. They see the situation for what it is, a black man, penalized for something that others might have gotten a pass for. They start organizing protests, gathering in front of the store, demanding that Marcus be reinstated. They argue that this isn't just about a company policy violation, it's about the systemic discrimination that black men face in the workplace, where even acts of kindness can be twisted into grounds for punishment. Community leaders join in, calling for an investigation into the company's practices. They highlight past incidents where white employees had received nothing more than a warning for similar behavior. Marcus's firing, they argue, is part of a larger pattern of racial inequality in corporate America. What started as a small, local story starts gaining attention on a national level. Soon, news outlets pick up the story. Reporters interview Marcus, his voice steady but clearly strained. His face isn't seen, but his words carry the weight of everything he's been through. He explains that all he did was help someone, and now he's lost his livelihood. The media coverage turns the spotlight on the company, and the public pressure mounts. People start boycotting the store, calling out the unfairness of Marcus's firing on social media. The company tries to defend itself, releasing statements about how they value safety and follow strict policies, but the damage is done. No one buys their excuses. The story has gotten too big, and people are rallying behind Marcus, demanding that justice be served. And then, just as Marcus starts to wonder if things will ever change, he gets a phone call. On the other end of the line is a civil rights lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but one with a reputation for taking on high-profile cases of workplace discrimination and winning. The lawyer tells Marcus that he's been following the story and believes there's a solid case here. This is more than just a wrongful termination. It's about race, fairness, and doing the right thing. Marcus listens, unsure at first. He's never thought of himself as someone who would end up in the middle of a legal battle, let alone one that could draw so much attention. He's just a regular guy, trying to take care of his family. But as the lawyer talks, Marcus realizes that this might be his only shot at real justice. If he doesn't fight back, what's to stop this from happening to someone else? The lawyer offers to represent Marcus, and as the call ends, Marcus sits in silence for a while. He knows this won't be easy. It's going to be a long, difficult road. But for the first time since he was fired, he feels a sense of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, he can turn this around. Maybe, this is his chance to not only get his job back but to stand up for something bigger than himself. As Marcus stares at the letter of dismissal again, he knows that the fight isn't over. In fact, it's just beginning. The lawyer who had reached out to Marcus was a force to be reckoned with. Known for his work in high-profile discrimination cases, he had built a reputation on fighting for justice where others wouldn't. He was sharp, meticulous, and deeply invested in exposing the systemic issues plaguing corporate America. The kind of person who saw the bigger picture behind individual cases. Marcus's situation, in his eyes, wasn't just about a wrongful termination, it was a glaring example of how racial bias seeped into everyday decisions. This wasn't just a fight for Marcus's job, it was a battle against a much larger system of inequality. At first, Marcus didn't want to hear it. He wasn't sure if he was the right person to take on something so big. He was already exhausted, mentally, emotionally, and financially, after everything that had happened. His family was still reeling from the loss of income, and the idea of dragging them into a prolonged legal fight seemed too much. What if this made it harder for him to find work in the future? What if companies saw him as a troublemaker, someone who sued his employer, and refused to hire him? The fear of long-term consequences weighed heavily on his mind. He sat down with his wife, laying out all his concerns. She listened patiently, letting him vent. Marcus had always been a calm, thoughtful man, but the pressure was getting to him, and she could see it. When he finished, she took his hand and reminded him of something important, that he had done nothing wrong. He hadn't just lost his job, he had been wrong. And if he let this go, they might face financial hardship now, but what about others like him? Wouldn't they continue to suffer the same injustices? She told him, "You've always taught our kids to stand up for what's right. You showed them that when you helped that man in the store. You've already done the right thing. Now you just need to keep going." Her words hit Marcus hard. He knew she was right, but it didn't make the decision any easier. Still, with her support behind him, Marcus agreed to move forward. He called the lawyer the next day. The case took shape quickly. The lawyer meticulously gathered evidence, speaking to employees from other branches of the company and analyzing their records. He uncovered a troubling pattern. Incidents involving white employees going beyond their assigned duties, helping customers or bending minor rules, had been brushed off as acts of good service. There were no terminations, no disciplinary actions. Yet Marcus, a black man, had been fired for a single act of kindness. This disparity formed the core of their argument, that Marcus had been singled out not just for violating policy, but because of the color of his skin. As the legal battle ramped up, something unexpected happened. The elderly disabled man whom Marcus had helped that day stepped back into the picture. His story had gone largely unnoticed in the whirlwind of media attention, but now, he decided to speak up. He remembered Marcus's kindness and was outraged when he learned of the firing. He felt responsible, in a way, as though Marcus had been punished for helping him. Determined to help, the man started a petition, demanding that Marcus be reinstated. It quickly gained traction online, gathering thousands of signatures from people across the country. The support was overwhelming, and it brought a human face to the situation that the legal arguments couldn't fully capture. This wasn't just about rules or policies. It was about real people. Marcus had helped someone, and now that person was fighting back for him. Despite the growing support, the stress weighed heavily on Marcus. He struggled to sleep, his mind racing at all hours of the night. He'd wake up in the early hours of the morning, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he had made the right choice. The court date loomed, and with each passing day, the tension in his house grew thicker. His kids could sense something was wrong, and though his wife remained his pillar of strength, even she seemed more drained as the weeks dragged on. It wasn't just at home either. His community was split. Some friends and neighbors supported him wholeheartedly, proud that Marcus was standing up for himself and for what was right. Others, though, were more cautious. They warned him to be careful, to think about how far he wanted to push things. "The company's powerful," they'd say. "You don't want to make too many enemies." There were whispers of retaliation, rumors that the company might try to blacklist him from getting future jobs in the area. Marcus was torn. He knew they were probably right to worry. But the fight felt bigger than just him now. Too many people were watching, rooting for him to win, to prove that people like him didn't have to just accept mistreatment. As the court date neared, things took an unexpected turn. The company, feeling the pressure from the growing public outcry and the petition, reached out to Marcus with a settlement offer. The amount wasn't small. It was enough to ease the financial burden on his family for a while, maybe even help them get back on their feet. But the offer came with a catch. The company wanted Marcus to sign a non-disclosure agreement, essentially agreeing to never speak publicly about the firing or the lawsuit again. It was their way of sweeping the issue under the rug, a quiet resolution that would avoid further negative press for them. Marcus was faced with a choice. The settlement would bring immediate relief, but at the cost of silence. If he took it, he could move on from the ordeal, but the company would face no real accountability, and the message his fight had begun to send would fizzle out. On the other hand, rejecting the offer meant continuing a difficult, uncertain battle. The court case could drag on, the stress would continue to mount, and there were no guarantees that he would win. He stood at a crossroads, torn between taking the easier way out for his family's sake or continuing the fight for something bigger: justice, fairness, and change. He knew he couldn't make this decision alone. But as he looked at his family and thought about the people rallying behind him, he realized the choice wasn't just about him anymore. With the offer on the table and the weight of the decision pressing down, Marcus was left with the hardest question of all. Was he willing to risk it all for the chance to make a difference? The courtroom is tense, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Marcus sits quietly, his expression unreadable, surrounded by lawyers and supporters. The company's representatives are seated across from him, stoic and professional, each side faceless in the moment, reduced to symbols of something much larger than themselves. The judge presides over the room, a figure of authority, but as yet unyielding. All the faces blur into anonymity, but the words spoken carry the weight of everything they represent: justice, fairness, the human need for dignity. The company's defense begins, as their lead attorney steps forward confidently. He speaks in measured tones, presenting the narrative that Marcus had acted irresponsibly, recklessly even, by assisting the elderly disabled man. "Mr. Marcus," he says, "knowingly violated company policy by engaging in an action that could have resulted in injury to himself or the customer. These safety protocols exist for a reason, and while we commend his intentions, the rules are in place to protect both employees and patrons." There is no mention of race, no direct acknowledgement of the undercurrent running beneath this entire case. They focus only on the violation of safety procedures, insisting that Marcus's termination was simply a matter of enforcing those rules. They paint him as someone who, while well-meaning, acted without regard for the consequences, endangering both himself and the elderly man. As the company's lawyer continues to speak, Marcus listens in silence, but inside, he's filled with a quiet fury. They are trying to turn a simple act of kindness into a reckless breach of policy, ignoring the humanity behind what happened. The lawyer's words feel hollow, distant, but they are dangerous in their simplicity, twisting the truth into something unrecognizable. Then it's Marcus's turn. He steps up, not with bravado but with a quiet strength, as his lawyer invites him to share his side. The courtroom grows still as Marcus begins to speak. His testimony is calm, but every word carries the weight of the last few months, the struggle, the doubt, the pain of losing his job over something so small yet so important. "I helped that man because he needed help," Marcus says. His voice is clear, unwavering. "I didn't think about the policies or the rules in that moment. I thought about what was right. I saw someone who couldn't reach an item he needed, and I stepped in to do what anyone else would do." He pauses, and for a moment, there's only silence in the courtroom. The faceless figures around him seem to fade away as his words take center stage. "I didn't think that doing something kind would cost me my job. I didn't expect to be sitting here, defending an act of decency. And I definitely didn't expect to be treated differently because of who I am. But here I am, because the company decided that helping someone wasn't worth keeping me on. That somehow, following a rule was more important than doing what's right." Marcus's words hit hard, resonating throughout the courtroom. He doesn't need to mention the racial undertones explicitly. They are there, woven into the fabric of his story. The injustice speaks for itself. He talks about how the firing has affected him, how it's left his family in financial distress, how he's questioned his own self-worth. But above all, he conveys the simple truth: he was fired for doing something good, and that's something that shouldn't happen to anyone. As Marcus finishes his testimony, the room feels charged. His words have moved not just the people present, but also those watching from afar. Outside the courthouse, crowds have gathered, holding signs of support, chanting for justice. News cameras are rolling, and the case has become a national conversation. People across the country are watching, debating the broader issues of race, justice, and fairness in the workplace. The case is no longer just about Marcus, it's about something bigger. The courtroom proceedings drag on for days, with both sides making their arguments. The company's lawyers try to steer the conversation back to policy and safety, while Marcus's team continues to press the issue of racial bias and injustice. The tension builds as the judge listens to the arguments, takes notes, and asks questions. Each moment feels heavier than the last, as the fate of not just Marcus but the broader societal implications hangs in the balance. Finally, the day comes for the judge's ruling. The courtroom is packed, and the air is thick with anticipation. The faceless figures of the company's legal team sit still, waiting. Marcus, too, waits, his heart pounding in his chest, though outwardly, he remains calm. The judge begins to speak, his voice measured and deliberate, recounting the key points of the case, summarizing both sides. And then, in a decisive moment, the ruling is delivered. The judge finds in favor of Marcus. The company is ordered to reinstate Marcus, pay damages, and make sweeping changes to their workplace policies to address the discriminatory practices that had come to light during the trial. There is no fanfare, no celebration in the courtroom, just a sense of quiet resolution. Marcus has won, but it is a victory tempered by the weight of everything that came before it. The company's actions, though rebuked, still leave scars. As Marcus exits the courthouse, the noise from the crowd outside swells, cheering his victory. The cameras follow him, reporters shout questions, but Marcus remains quiet, composed. He knows that while this battle has been won, the larger fight is far from over. There are still countless others who face the same struggles he did, who aren't as lucky to have their stories heard. Walking down the courthouse steps, Marcus feels the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He has become a symbol, not just of resistance, but of hope. The crowd sees him as a victor, a man who stood up and fought for what was right. But Marcus knows this is just the beginning. There's still so much work to be done, and now, he's not just fighting for himself, he's fighting for all those who deserve the same justice. With the judgment in his favor, Marcus's fight is over, but the journey to make sure others are treated fairly has just begun. Marcus is reinstated at his job, but the moment he steps back into the store, it's clear things are different. Some of his coworkers greet him with smiles and open arms, genuinely happy to see him back. They admire him for what he's been through and respect the stand he took. Others, though, avoid eye contact, their greetings cold, their conversations brief. The tension in the air is unmistakable. Some are uncomfortable with the attention his case brought to the company, wary of how it might affect their own positions. Others simply resent the disruption. Marcus is caught in a strange space, part hero, part outcast. But Marcus isn't here to make everyone comfortable. He came back because he knew it was the right thing to do, and though the environment may be different, his mission is the same. He goes about his duties with the same quiet dedication as before, even as whispers follow him down the aisles. Marcus is no longer just another employee. His actions have made him a symbol, whether he wanted to be or not. His return marks more than just a personal victory. It triggers real, lasting change. The legal victory sets a precedent. New policies are rolled out, not only in his company but across others in the industry. Rules are put in place to protect workers from unjust terminations, especially in cases where acts of kindness might conflict with rigid corporate guidelines. His case becomes a benchmark, cited in future workplace discrimination lawsuits, and it sparks conversations about how businesses treat their employees, especially those from marginalized communities. Marcus, once just a man doing his job, is now a part of something much larger, a movement for fairness and justice. As Marcus settles back into the rhythm of his work, he finds himself reflecting on everything that's happened. He's been through a battle he never asked for, but one that changed him profoundly. Before all of this, he was a man who believed in doing the right thing, but now he knows what that truly costs. It wasn't just the months of stress and uncertainty, the financial strain, or the emotional toll. It was the way the ordeal shifted his perspective on life, work, and himself. He recognizes the toll it took on his family, too. His wife had been his rock, standing by him when things looked their bleakest, encouraging him when he doubted himself. His children, though young, had felt the weight of it too, noticing the tension in the house. But in the end, they all emerged stronger. They had faced adversity together, and come through on the other side, more united than ever. Marcus knows now that standing up for what's right isn't just about the immediate victory, it's about what you leave behind for those who come after you. The weeks pass, and Marcus begins to feel more like himself again. There are still hard days, moments where the weight of everything presses on him, but for the most part, life is settling back into its familiar rhythm. And yet, something is different. Marcus has changed. He feels stronger, more sure of himself. He knows now that he has a voice, and he's learned how powerful that voice can be when used in the right way. One afternoon, while he's working his usual shift, Marcus notices a customer struggling to reach an item on a high shelf. For a brief second, he's reminded of that fateful day when everything changed. But this time, there's no hesitation. Without thinking twice, he walks over, grabs the item, and hands it to the customer with a smile. It's a simple act, no different from the one that set off the chain of events months ago. But now, Marcus feels no fear of consequences, no worry about whether helping someone might cost him his job. The policies have changed, the world has shifted, and Marcus knows that doing the right thing is always worth it. As the customer thanks him and walks away, Marcus stands there for a moment, reflecting on how far he's come. He thinks about the disabled man he helped all those months ago, the legal battle, the courtroom, the people who stood by him, and those who didn't. He thinks about the changes that have been made, not just for him, but for others who will never have to go through what he did. And in that moment, he feels at peace. Marcus smiles to himself. He knows the fight isn't over, not for him, not for others like him. But he's ready for whatever comes next. Because no matter the cost, no matter the struggle, he's learned that doing the right thing is always worth it. And in the end, it's not about the attention, the recognition, or even the victory in court. It's about those small, everyday acts of kindness, and the ripple effects they can have on the world. As he walks back to his duties, Marcus feels lighter, a quiet sense of satisfaction filling his heart. He doesn't need to say anything, doesn't need anyone to acknowledge what he's done. He knows what matters most. And for him, that's enough.